Hello, everyone. I'm Ben, and my Eli project was on decolonizing UCSB. So, on the left here, we have a familiar building, Portola Dining Commons. My friends will know I commonly call it Portoilet. And then, what do you associate the building with? Probably with the food, but I actually discovered something recently, and that's that the building's also named after colonialism. So the Portola expedition is this European expedition that went through California, and that was the first time Europeans contacted the Chumash, and that was the beginning of the destruction of Chumash culture. And when I found out about this, I was shocked. I found out about it through a class I was in, given by this person, Spencer James, who's a Chumash filmmaker and speaker. And the lecture started with UCSB's land acknowledgement, and I silently whispered to myself that the land acknowledgement is subpar. And then he started talking about the history of the Chumash here, and he mentioned the Portola expedition. Now, I had just eaten at Portola Dining Commons for lunch, and I instantly made the connection. And my immediate thought was to change the name. That was not Spencer's idea, but like this kind of motion, that's the revelation I was getting. So, and my thought was to change the name. And that led me to my Eli project. So my goals from fall quarter, my mountaintop goal was to make UCSB take action on their land acknowledgement and honor the Chumash. My SMART goal specifically was changing the name of Portola Dining Commons, and an important part of that is that the Chumash would choose the new name. Them choosing the new name was critical to actually decolonizing the building. And my goal was to have all of this done by the end of the school year. Now, we're at the end of the school year, and in case you haven't figured out already, the building's still called Portola Dining Commons. But to get to why, let's first go through my game plan. My game plan was to talk to the Chumash first, which I would go through the American Indian and Indigenous organizations on campus, and eventually use that to talk to the Chumash. After that, my goal was to gather support through a petition and then bring that to housing and dining, and eventually Chancellor Yang to change the building's name. Unfortunately, after I talked to the Chumash, I realized that there were a lot of problems with changing the name. The two main problems were that there are multiple dialects of the Chumash language. There's multiple bands of the Chumash, and each one of them have different dialects and different cultures. And to choose one name for the building would exclude other bands of the Chumash, so I ended up not. It's really hard to choose a new name for that, so we ended up not changing the building's name. And then another problem is cultural mixing. So there's actually no one alive today who's 100% Chumash. Everyone is a mixture of multiple American Indian groups, and a lot of them also have Spanish heritage. So a big thing is that their cultures are mixed and also their genetics are mixed. So to remove the name Portola and to ignore colonialism would be taking away a part of their identity. And this is something that was news to me, but it was really thought-provoking. So we ended up deciding not to change the building's name. So this led me to creating a new plan where instead of changing the building's name, I would have an event where we would make signs honoring ethnobotany. This is something I'd come across while I was talking to them, and it's something I want to highlight. But more things went wrong in there. So the previous problems from before were still a thing. So in making an event on ethnobotany, I wanted to make signs kind of like this or the signs over here. And some of the plants do have Chumash names, but again, the question is which Chumash name do you choose? And then in representing naturalized plants, these are the plants that are not from here, but are naturalized in our area. They're not invasive. They're living alongside the native plants here. And that was just a big problem with this. If we give some of the plants a Chumash name, the non-native plants would not have a Chumash name, and that's labeling them as non-native, which a lot of people will see as invasive. And it actually ties into the immigration problem nowadays. We tend to think that any non-native plants are bad and we want to get rid of them. And that ties into people thinking, unfortunately, that all immigrants are bad. And that was something I did not think of going into this, but when I found that out, I realized that that would be really problematic. Another problem was space ownership. Simply having signs there invites other people into the space, and they might start doing things like picking the plants or interacting in the space more. And that might seem nice, but an important thing to remember is that that is an American Indian and Indigenous space, and that's something they really want to keep it as their space. It's important that they have spaces that are just for them. Obviously, they have some spaces that are more public, but they really need some spaces that are more private too. And all of this just leads me to reflections and engaging in environmental justice. You really need like a lot of patience and communication, openness and research. There were times where I was getting impatient and these other things were breaking down. I definitely got frustrated, but ultimately, I think I was resilient in the process and in realizing that maybe my original plans would not be the best idea for this. And I do want to highlight that no external change in the project does not mean it was a failure. No external change just means there's a lot of internal growth. I really learned a lot about myself as a leader and in being resilient and engaging with diverse views that I was not necessarily aware of. So I think there's a lot of internal growth in this project, even if there is no final product, so to say. Although I do have kind of a final product, I really wanted to highlight that renaming is one of many paths toward justice. I realized that during this project, it's not the only path, and I actually wrote a Daily Nexus article that explores the power of renaming and where it can work, but also why it does not work here. And looking forward, I want to continue working with the Chumash, but I also want to take an approach that focuses on my passions, and I want to continue communicating with them. This whole project really got me into plants. I actually would not have gotten into plants without this project, and now that's related to my career goals. So my goal is to actually make an ethnobotany field guide. Many field guides are focused on a Western science point of view, and I really want to make something that's more aligned to the Chumash point of view with things like plant uses. And I just want to, so thank you for listening to my presentation. And before I go, I just want to highlight some people who are really helpful. Tara Sage Wallen is a graduate student in the American Indian and Indigenous Student Association, and she was a really helpful point person and a big support in my project. Maria Elena Lopez is a member of the coastal band of the Chumash, and she was really helpful in giving me all of my information. And of course, I want to thank my professor, Dr. Erica Zalet, and my Eli mentor, Dr. Katya Armistead. But yes, thank you for listening.